Hi, my name is Pippa Lyceum and welcome to the Handstand Academy. This video is to show you the handstand foundations so that you can bring this into your practice. So the first thing is we're going to be looking at a handstand line. Now a handstand line is to find that alignment in a handstand. It helps you balance and also it helps you to add variations in your handstand when you want to progress in your handstand. So the first thing to do is to, one, understand your handstand line, and two, understand the terminology. So if you bring your feet together, you want to squeeze the inner thighs, squeeze the bottom, pull up the kneecaps. So we're really active in the legs here. Interlock the fingers, have the palms facing downwards, and extend the arms up over the head. Now notice I've got really straight and locked out arms. And if I said bring your shoulders to your ears, you want to think about extending up, closing the light between the shoulder and the ear. Now, as we do this, it's very common to open and flare out the ribs. What we want to do here instead is draw the lower ribs in, and this is called hollow. So keep extending up, hollow, and open out the shoulders as much as you can. So what we're looking for is if we drew a line on the side of the body from the wrist all the way down to the ankle bone, it would be one straight line. So if I said to you, when you were upside down in a handstand, give me more pike, what do you think you would do? You would actually start to fold from the hips. So that upside down is pike. If you were slightly arched, then this would make more sense to you because then we would need to close in and pike from the hips. If I said you were arched and you need to hollow, you'd then start to draw the lower ribs in, draw the sternum in as well. So there's arch, there's pike, and there's also hollow. You also want to know the terminology of extending up, so shoulders by ears, and there's another one which is opening out the hips. So you might be slightly piked here, and if someone said to you, open out the hips, you'd think thrusting the hips forwards, and that should help you understand when you're upside down. Also, as a spotter, it's really good to know the terminology as well. This enables you to help people, and spotting is also one of those things that it's another skill. So it's a really lovely skill to start learning, and having the terminology for that is amazing. So your second exercise is actually the same thing but on the floor. The floor is a really lovely guideline to find your handstand line. Just remember that everyone has a different shaped body. So we have kyphosis or lordosis, which is a nice sway back. We also have flat back. Flat back is amazing, obviously, for handstands. But if you are kyphosis or slightly lordosis or a mixture of both, you may find that when lying against the floor that you will actually start to notice that you might have to rock forwards and back a little bit and adjust. We're adjusting to our body type, so it doesn't really matter if you can't completely do this exercise. It's training, and it's also understanding we all have a different body. So you're going to lie onto the floor. Again, feet together, ankles together. You want to zip up the legs, point the toes, extend the arms over the head, have the palms flexed and chin on the floor, and really extend up here, shoulders by ears. What you'll notice is when I start to hollow, I start to draw the lower ribs in, I draw the sternum, and you want to bring your hips to the floor and hollow. So that is your second exercise, just to understand alignment. So when we're doing a handstand, one of the very first questions that we think about is where we're going to place our hands. So when we place our hands down, actually you want to have our hands a little bit closer together than shoulder width. So if you interlock your fingers, bring your arms over your head, and if you draw your shoulders to your ears, notice the gap between the wrists. So when you place your hands down, it's not as wide as the shoulders. It's a little bit further inwards. And you want to have your index finger facing forwards. This encourages external rotation. So it's coming from the shoulder. A lot of our handstands is coming from the traps, and we're really reaching up and we externally rotate. If we're internally rotating, it's a completely different handstand, and we're actually not using the traps as much. So we want to think about when we place our hand onto the ground, we're twisting outwards. So if there was some mud, we want to twist the mud outwards. So index finger facing forwards and our hands a little bit further inwards than shoulder width. Now, looking at our arms, my arms are locked. The reason for this is because we're using structure, but also the muscle from the shoulder. So if you have hyperextended elbows like I do, you're going to look after your elbows by having the strength of the shoulders. So here, this is when I would really recommend doing shoulder exercises to strengthen the shoulders, and so that we don't dip into the elbows into the joints. So once you've got your setup, you're going to have nice straight arms. You're going to lift your hips high. And here we want to think about shoulders over the wrists. Common mistake is to plant, which is going too far forwards. And that's a real common thing for people who have a lot of strength. And maybe their elbows might be slightly bent as well, and they're really using as much strength as possible. The thing about a handstand is that if we have the setup right, it can be much easier and we're not having to use as much strength. It's more coming from the shoulders. So you've got your hands, you've got your arms, you know where the placement of the shoulders are. The next thing is to really thinking about extending up from the shoulders. And where to look, you're going to be looking in between your hands with your forehead or your third eye. Now, it might be slightly different for each person, but the thing that we don't want to do is overextend in the neck. So overextending in the neck looks like this. What we want to do is drop the head slightly. We're still looking at the floor, but we're kind of looking directly in between the hands, so we're not overextending. So once we're here, we've got our shoulders over the wrists, we're opening out the shoulders, we're extending up, we're looking with our forehead. And how would you get into your first ever handstand? The first thing that we usually start looking at is kicking up. And kicking up can take a little bit of time. The reason for this, it might be coordination, but it also might be because you're having to learn to get your hips over your shoulders, and maybe it might be a little bit of strength, both in the wrists as well as the shoulders. So there's a lot going on. However, when we start to kick up, we're going to lift our top leg, we bend the supporting leg, and we want to kick with that top leg. So we've got a nice dynamic movement going on. We lift the leg, we bend, and we kick. If this feels good and we can really keep straight arms, then I would also test with bending your legs, keeping straight arms, and then lifting the hips high. So this is just another drill where it's a little bit more even and with the weight, and we can really test if our shoulders are in place over our wrists, and we're really extending up here, and we can use that dynamic movement. So if those two components are working and we've got straight arms, I really encourage you to actually film yourself when you're doing these exercises. If those two components are starting to work and you feel like you've got your shape and you're really ingraining really well, then we can start to add a little bit of a jump. So we lift the top leg, bend the supporting leg, and just push with the ball of the foot. It doesn't really need to be high. We want to take baby steps here. And then eventually we'll start to get the hips up. And we just want to keep in that L-shaped position. And really concentrate when we are kicking up Not to have those micro bends. We're pushing down into the floor. We're thinking about our hollow. We've got the coordination going. We're pointing the toes. We're really active in the legs. So there's a lot going on, but that is your first exercise. You can do it by the wall if you feel that there's a little bit of fear.